Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Cimmerian September. This is a BookTube event created, of course, by Michael K. Vaughan that's designed to celebrate Conan the Barbarian, the immortal creation of Robert E. Howard, in all of his shapes and sizes and all of his various interpretations. The informal concentration for this year's Cimmerian September is Conan pastiche fiction, and especially the pastiche novels that dare not speak their name, the pastiche novels by Elsbrey de Camp and Lynn Carter, where they liberally adapted a lot of what Robert E. Howard actually wrote and liberally added in stuff of their own. So that for a whole generation of people encountering Conan from those books, those people would have said, well, these aren't Conan pastiche novels. It says Robert E. Howard's name right on the cover. It was only later that the howls of protest from the purists were heard, and the idea was given credence that Robert E. Howard's original writings on Conan are just that and deserve to be treated that way, no matter what you think of their literary quality. You're perfectly free to do Conan pastiche novels all the day long, but you can't call your pastiche novel something written by Robert E. Howard. And long before the hallmark corrected text of Robert E. Howard came out and that argument started to gain ground, actual pastiche novels were launched, a whole row of them, just a whole bookcase of them. Once upon a time, I had them all. At one point or another, I've had them all. I don't have, in print and paper form, I don't have that many of them now because for me, in my mind, I reflexively make up categories of what is a perfect candidate for ebook versus paper, versus print and paper, which takes up space and needs to be boxed and moved when you move. What is a perfect candidate for that? And I just go through that list in my mind, like Louis L'Amour westerns, for instance. There's virtually no Louis L'Amour western that I've ever read that I didn't love, but there are 500 of them. And if you have them as an ebook, you've got them. So you don't need to do that. For me, the Brother Cadfael Mysteries by Ellis Peters. There are a whole bunch of them. They take up a whole broad shelf in a bookcase, but I don't need them to be a book. And the same thing I ended up saying about Conan pastiche novels. I got rid of most of them. I kind of wish that I hadn't, because there is something appropriately pulpy about reading a Conan pastiche novel in a yellowing old paperback. There's something appropriate to that I hadn't counted on. So the next time I uncover a tranche of those, I will just get them all and I will keep them. I thought the same thing about the Elsbrey de Camp Lynn Carter Conan volumes. I went looking for them in paperback because the reading of the ebook just wasn't the same. But most Conan pastiche novels, I don't know. I don't know. I've read all of them. I think I've read all of them or most of them. And last night I put one on the pile because I realized that I'd been neglecting Cimmerian September. I don't want to slack off on any BookTube event. So last night I put one on the pile largely based on the author. Because certain Conan pastiche writers returned over and over again to the material. Usually I think out of deep love of Robert E. Howard, of his writing, of his world. I don't get the impression, I don't know one way or another, but I don't get the strong impression a lot of these things were done for money. Unlike some franchises I could name. So last night I reread Conan the Victorious by Robert Jordan, the Robert Jordan, the Wheel of Time author, Robert Jordan, who wrote these things. He wrote a few Conan novels, enough of them so they filled 2 hardcover omnibus collections. I have this as an ebook. I don't think I have the paperback anymore. This is... Maybe it's a good thing, because this is not good. It'll scratch an itch if you really just want a Conan story. But it's a little static, much like the Boris Vallejo cover here. I mean, look at Conan. If a evil sorceress, no matter how nubile, were summoning a ravening demon in front of you, is that how you would stand? Wouldn't you be a little bit more active than that? I mean, that wouldn't work even you'd get yelled at by your tennis coach if you stood at the line like that. You have to be a little more active than just standing there. I'll swat this like a fly. This is a story. Essentially, this book is a story of 2 sorcerers who are at war with each other and have been for a long time. And Conan just sort of gets caught up in the middle of that war between two sorcerers. He is the armed muscle for a smuggler's band, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on, a whole bunch of minutia interplay between different groups of smugglers, different kinds of villains, with Conan involved mainly just in making sure that he gets paid, until at one point early on in the book, he gets scratched with a poison blade. And now he's got this poison working in his body, and he's got to find a cure for the poison. And that serves throughout a lot of this book, that serves as his motivation. Just medical help. Or he doesn't seem to really care that much about either side of the conflict that's involved here, and that's not particularly satisfying. I know it's only Conan, and all his stories are paired in weird tales right next to bug-eyed monsters and nubile death cults. But even so, I want a motivation for Conan. It doesn't need to be a deep motivation when I'm talking about staging Hamlet here, but I want some reason for it to be a Conan story. And not only does Conan spend most of this book concentrating on getting a cure for the poison that is for some reason not killing him right away, but when he gets it, well, that's fine by him. The war between the magicians, the war between the wizards happens anyway. I mean, they I won't say they barely notice that he's involved, but they certainly don't primarily care that he's involved, and he doesn't either. It's two separate things. Now, I know that you could say, well, aren't you describing Tower of the Elephant? And don't you say Tower of the Elephant is a classic Conan story? I am, in a way, describing Tower of the Elephant, where Conan stumbles upon a long and bitter relationship between two supernatural beings, a wizard and an alien. And their war is between themselves. And I won't say again that they don't really notice that Conan exists, but their main concentration is their own enmity. But in Tower of the Elephant, Conan is the foot of fate. He is the hand of fate. He is the thing that turns the wheel and changes the static relationship between these two beings. He plays a pivotal role. And the reason he plays a pivotal role is because he's Conan. It's because he's so courageous. And has an immediate innate sense of right and wrong. He knows perfectly well in Tower of the Elephant no matter how strange this being is, when he's talking to a noble being versus an ignoble one. He knows perfectly well which side to take, in other words. So they are fighting each other. The wizard and the alien are fighting each other, but Conan is important to that story. Here, not so much. Not at all. Not only does he not care, but they don't really care. And it's so wordy. I was reading this and I was thinking, okay, well, there's two Robert Jordans. Because I've read, Robert Jordan has written Conan novels that were really, really good. This is not, I don't think, one of them. And that's because there are two Robert Jordans. There are two registers. Any of you who've read Wheel of Time will know. The Robert Jordan who writes Eye of the World is very different from the Robert Jordan who writes book number 10. Whatever the heck it's called. The book number 10, Robert Jordan is in love with the sound of his own voice. He's just, as Truman Capote says, that's typing. That's not writing, that's typing. He's just going on and on. And he comes close to going on and on out of many different sections in this book. This was no more satisfying to me. I think I read this 40 years ago when it first came out, and it was not satisfying to me then. In fact, I almost remember writing in my journal. I usually, when I would finish a book, I'd be writing the day's journal entry, and I would make a little box, just a little rectangular box that I gave borders to when I was writing a quick response to that book, a little larval book reviewing going on there, and I remember writing a box like that for this book and saying it worked fairly well, but it was a little by the numbers. It did not ever feel really like Conan. And this read along, I doubt I'll read this again. That's a nice thing about having an ebook, is that I don't have to worry about whether or not I'm ever going to read it again. It'll be there. It'll be on the device. It'll be on 10 devices, and it'll be on a thumb drive. So and in the cloud. So barring the collapse of the Western economic system, I will always have access to it. So I don't have to worry about whether or not agonize over the paperback. Should I really keep this on the shelf? Am I ever going to really look at this again? I don't have to think about it, thankfully. But it was a lackluster return to Cimmerian September. This is a fairly lackluster novel. Now, if one of you out there has read this and you really like it, I know there are a handful of people who I don't know how many Conan fans know about BookTube or know about this little corner of BookTube. I would think they'd all know about Michael K. Vaughan. But I know there are a lot of fans of Robert E. Howard's Conan out there, and there were 2 volumes. The Conan Chronicles and the Further Chronicles of Conan or something like that. Those were hardcovers. And I'm not 100% sure I would pass those up if I saw them at a used bookstore. I'd probably get them. But any author can have an off day, right? If you read Conan the Victorious, first of all, that's another. What on earth does the title mean? Conan the Victorious, what? In getting dialysis? That's basically what his victory is that he gets medical treatment. What does that mean? Conan the single payer system? What does that mean? He's not victorious over anything. The victory at the end of the book is not his doing. He has no say in it, has no ability to affect it one way or another. It feels like it was pulled out of a hat. A lot of the details in here feel like Robert Jordan just wanted to live in the Hyborian Age for a little while, and this will do. But if you are a big fan of Robert Jordan's Conan stories and you like Conan the Victorian, please feel free to tell me. If I miss something, I'm happy to go back to it next Cimmerian September. But that's my report for this Cimmerian September: is Conan the Victorious over a poison that's working its way through his body and taking its sweet time to do that. So I'll hope for better tonight. I'm going to throw something else on the pile tonight, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.